a design or a kind of product was getting launched in US or Europe, it used to take 4 years for that to come to India. Now I think, and we are one of the few brands which are there in 22 countries. So we are in Europe, US, Canada, we are Middle East.
But when you thought about starting the Campus Sutra, like how did you identify this niche that I want to build for Indian students, an Indian brand? What thought kiya gaya?
So, for you, it is very natural to become an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. You've already been like a child entrepreneur.
Welcome, guys, to the new episode of Building in India. We are building this channel for the first-time founders who want to learn everything about startups. And today we have a very special guest, Dhiraj. Dhiraj and I have known for a long time. He is the founder of Campus Sutra. Welcome, Dhiraj.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. I hope it's like the chat that we usually have.
Exactly.
Coffee.
So we just try to keep it very candid, very casual. And we would love to know your story just to start with. How do you get started?
So I come from a very, very small village. The population of that village even today is around 2000.
Wow.
Right. So, and I still remember I was the first person there who could speak English. So, they used to present me like this specimen ki dekho is like ko hum deji aa.
And where is this village?
This is in Bihar.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and yeah, obviously had a very interesting childhood in terms of, somebody tried to kidnap me when I was about 7 years old. And then there was some shooting incident on my dad where, people shot at him and stuff. Who literally had to leave that place and come to Bangalore in the early 90s. Like, and I owe it big time to Bangalore. I say that, whatever I have today, I think Bangalore has a very, very big role to play in that. And that's how I became a Bangalore boy. Always wanted to be in business. Like that was my ikigai from a very, very early time. Like in that same village, I still remember during Diwali, people used to burst crackers. Like, milta nahi tha. So, we used to get it from Calcutta. But I thought it was more fun to set up a shop and sell those crackers and make money, right? So that was, so Kira palace hi tha. And so I started my journey with Walmart, but as soon as I could, I got into business. I started this Campus Sutra in 2014, so it's been about a decade from there.
But tell us something about Walmart. How did you get into Walmart?
Walmart was campus placement, but I think the great thing about Walmart was, especially when I joined, I was among the first 100 employees in Walmart. Right?
Wow.
So they were actually setting things up. So I went through the entire process where they were creating those 10-year plan. They were creating an organization which would kind of, the earlier aim that time was to do over $10 billion in India. So I've seen that process in terms of how big companies plan, that kind of volume. What are the structures that they put in place? How do they go about doing that entire exercise? So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. And second, I think Walmart as a company teaches you retail at a very basic level. It kind of ingrains retail in your DNA, right? So I'm really, really thankful to Walmart to kind of, have to help me kind of gain that experience. And that has helped me immensely when I started Campus Sutra.
So you spent 6 years at Walmart and then decided. So for you, it is very natural to become an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. You'd already been like a child entrepreneur. So there was like, what did you think about before you started? I mean, you're like, ye karna hai, ye dhanda karna hai. Were there things that went in your head before you decided to take a plunge?
So as I said, Kira to pehle si tha, business karna hai, ye to pakka tha. There were two insights which made us start Campus Sutra. The first insight was, and this is around 2013-14, Alibaba used to do Singles Day. Even now they do Singles Day, right? Which is their equivalent of Big Billion Day in China. And that year, Alibaba had done $1 billion in one day, right? And at that point of time, the entire e-commerce industry in India was about $1 billion for the whole year.
Yeah.
Right. So it was very clear to us that this industry is going to explode. If China with similar population is doing $1 billion, if one company in China is doing $1 billion in a day, there is no way that India is going to remain that small, right? So our first insight was that e-commerce is going to explode and we need to get into that. And the second insight was that if you look at how fashion was being driven, then and even now you can say, is that it is being aimed from the West. So if you walk into any college in India, right, you'd find people wearing Bob Marley or you find people wearing Northwestern University and stuff like that, right? Which is not what represents a person in India.
Sure.
It is not his language. It is not what he identifies with. But because the fashion is being imported from the West, he used to wear that. So I think the second insight that we had was that if we are able to create products which are meant for the people in colleges in India, there would be a natural affinity towards those products. Right. So these are the two insights that made us kind of start Campus Sutra.
It's very interesting because I've heard a similar story from somebody in the ecosystem a long time back, Dhiraj, and they say that the inflection point in the Indian e-commerce space happened a couple of months before India won the World Cup in 2011. Because Myntra was selling the Nike jerseys on Myntra, and that's where people went to buy it. Before that, people were very skeptical using their credit cards. I think there was credit cards and debit cards, but people were very skeptical transacting online. But here they were, if you want to support India for the World Cup, and everybody went and bought a t-shirt from, I think a 400 rupees, 600 rupee t-shirt.
Yeah. So we also had this aha moment, right? So we had a premises, and then we started this business, and we started doing, say, 1.5 crores a month, in the first year of our business. But in 2014 or 15, right? I think we had this first big event in India, and within 2 hours we got some $22,000.
Whoa!
Right? And this is 2014, right? Now $22,000 is nothing, and this was in 2 hours. So we used to just press enter, and $3,000 used to increase. So suddenly it kind of validated everything that we had thought of. Like, e-commerce is going to be big in India.
But your supply chain was built for that kind of...
No. So this was so we started from a haunted building in very close to MG Road. And this building was vacant for 32 years because there were stories ki bhoot aata hai. So sir, nobody wanted to take that. And so when I'm talking about these 22,000 orders, this was when we were in a 400 square feet office in that building. But the good thing about that building was कि वो पूरा खाली था. So we used all the veranda. We in fact were packing on the road, and we had few people stop by and see कि लोग कर क्या रहे हैं लोग road पे. But it was really exciting. I think we put in like 3-4 days of complete 24-hour cycle, and we were able to execute that.
But when you thought about starting the Campus Sutra, like how did you identify this niche that I want to build for Indian students, an Indian brand? वो thought क्या गया?
So Walmart Pay, we used to have this campaign like back to college.
Okay.
Personally. So if you look at the Western markets, this entire college and back to campus is very, very big. Any established retailer in the West, like a Walmart, would do like $30-40 billion of business just on that campaign, back to campus. It's like a very, very big thing. In India, you had a lot of brands which target youth, or which are talking about adventure, which are talking about something else.
Right.
They want to be a brand for the youth. But nobody had spoken about campuses or college students per se. Nobody was calling out and saying that, I am your brand if you are in college, right? So we thought that was a very interesting space to be in. And we have been able to create that connect. So initially when we started, when we built Campus Sutra, we used to do a lot of products which used to just give an avenue for people to express themselves. So we had, I still remember we had this t-shirt called Lawsome, right? I think we sold some 70,000-80,000 t-shirts of those, right? Because every lawyer who was kind of studying to be a lawyer, he thought it was very cool where you are able to say that, कि मैं lawyer हूँ, right? Like, so that's how it started. And over a period of time, we have realized that, so that's one aspect where you create designs which talk about a person, but then you also create products which are to the trend, right? Which many legacy brands are not able to. So we create designs and styles which are very, very edgy, which appeal to the college kids or the people who are just out of college. And that's where I think we are positioned as.
Very interesting. So you were saying that you sort of knew that there was a culture in the US where you went to UCLA, you went to Harvard, there's the gear that you buy, merchandise, the university makes money. In India, I think a lot of people are making those fakes for the same US universities, but you felt that, hey, there could be a brand affiliation that you could have to your own college.
Correct.
And then you say that you can influence that way.
Yeah. Also, I think if you just look at how fashion is going, right? Even say a few years back, the designs that you used to get in the West it used to take like 3, 4, 5 years for it to come to India.
Sure.
When people were creating products for youth, right? They were not specifically looking at what is the kind of trend which is going in college. What is the kind of design that a 18, 19, 20-year-old would want to buy, right? So that trend was completely missing, right? So what we have been able to do is get that trend right on their doorstep on day one. It's like if the iPhone is getting launched, right? There used to be a time when people had to wait 2 months to get that in India.
Right.
In fashion, maybe that cycle was 4 years. That if a design or a kind of product was getting launched in US or Europe, It used to take 4 years for that to come to India. Now I think, and we are one of the few brands which are there in 22 countries. So we are in Europe, US, Canada, we are Middle East. So and because of that, we get to see fashion across the world. Right? So I think now we are at day zero, or maybe minus.
So you're like a Netflix of fashion pretty much in that particular subculture. So you're basically seeing influences in different places and you can plug
Correct
as well.
And I'm also able to see how it is evolving, right? So I see that now India is no longer behind on fashion. The kind of products that a 18, 19-year-old has an access to in India, it's the same in Europe. We don't have to wait 2-3 years to get that fashion. Maybe in some categories, in some styling, right? We are leading rather than trailing them. So I think that's the change that has come about.
Also, fashion as an industry, the pace of evolution is immense. Like it just so quickly evolves. So I'm assuming like you're a design first company, like you bring a lot of innovative designs. How do you keep track of that, or how do you motivate your design team? What thought goes behind it? That
So I think the way fashion industry has been in India, I think it has been very, very slow, right? I would not say that they have been very fast, right? It's a very old industry. It's after food, the most basic thing is clothes, right? It has been there for hundreds of years. So many companies in India, even abroad, they get used to a certain way of working, a certain way of designing, a certain way of whatever, right? There's certain rule book that gets created. So what we realized early on when we started Campus Sutra, that was if we were to build a 25, 50, 100 crore brand, that can be done by just following that rule book. But if we had to create a 500 crore or 1,000 crore brand, we had to break that rule. And in fashion, if you have to kind of create the differentiation, it has to come from the back end. Front end is where most of the people kind of focus on, especially in D2C. Kitna repeat aa raha hai, inside mil raha hai, kitna NXYZ, whatever, right? But we realized very early on कि 1,000 crore का business बनाना है, that we need to create differentiation in the back end. So what our initial effort of 2-3 years was to create that differentiation. And so we made 75 changes to a traditional, supply chain of fashion. And whatever we are today or whatever we have been able to create is a byproduct of that. And it gives a certain advantage, just to kind of explain that and try to kind of keep it in the layman term, right? So if I like the shirt that you're wearing, a legacy brand in India will take 6 months to 18 months to get it on the shelf.
Okay.
We are able to do it in 21 days.
Oh wow!
Right. So it is a clear-cut differentiation that the customer sees, right? Second, so if
To like material selection, fast prototyping, all of that kind of stuff, and it's sorted through your supply chain, goes out fast.
Yeah. So we, for example, we launched 1,000 new designs every month. Right?
Wow.
And this is planned like in a cycle of 45 days to 60 days versus the traditional 12 to 18 months. So if there's a legacy brand in India, they are thinking of 2026 summer, right? So all the fabrics that they're using, all the design sense that they're using is of now, but the product will hit their shelf in 20 months later. So by that time, it's already very, very old, right? In terms of what's available in the market. But because we have bought this so close net, that a person is able to get an immense number of design, 1,000 styles. Most of the established brands don't have a portfolio of 1,000 styles, right? We do 1,000 styles per month. And these are all up to date, as in,
And these 1,000 styles that you do per month are completely self-created in-house.
Yeah, obviously.
Wow.
Obviously. So we kind of control this from the designing yarn stage till the final delivery to the customer. So we obviously design the product, then we buy yarn, we do the knitting, weaving, whatever is required, get the fabric, we manufacture it, and then whatever is required at the front end in terms of.
So your forecasting has also been spot on, right? Dhiraj, and when you built the business, of course, we talk about supply chain innovation and how you're going to bring the speed to shelf. Your forecasting has to be really, really good, right? Because otherwise, you can't be stuck with having more inventory and less demand, or the other way around as well, right?
So it's a very technology-driven business. We kind of, in our company, we always have this maxim that we say that, if you have to scale anything, if you have a business problem, you try and convert it into a technology problem and then solve for it. Right? So, and this is what has really worked for us. So whatever problems that you can think of in fashion business, how do you do replenishment? How do you decide kya banana hai? How do you decide manufacturing? How do you control manufacturing? How do you take care of? So in our warehouse, for example, we have 2.3 million pieces at any point of time. So how do you take care of that inventory? Everything has to be kind of, driven by that whole technology.
Tech is a strategic advantage.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I mean, because I can think of 3 companies in your space who have truly innovated. Obviously, everybody knows Zara. The other is fast fashion. And the third is Shein. Right? These are 3 probably companies that you probably take as inspiration as well. But because doing it in a legacy industry like this, it's in a market like India is no mean feat.
So Zara is actually the Campus Sutra of Europe. They are very honest, they are right. We in India think of Zara or any other brand and we had still that overhang of, international brand and all of that. But if you look at the design philosophy, if you look at the way of working, or especially when they started, I think the philosophy was more or less the same.
Small batches, get out faster.
Make it affordable for the customer. So in India, Zara is a premium brand.
Yeah.
But in Europe, it is a mass luxury brand. It's the same positioning as Campus Sutra. So and some of these markets they compete with them. So we understand. In European market, in fact, there are times when we are more expensive than them, and still we are able to kind of market our product and sell our product. So
And Uniqlo is probably like solid colors.
Correct.
Not too many SKUs.
Correct.
They know what customers want and what to buy repeatedly.
So Uniqlo is more about functionality. Zara is more about design. So we are also a more design-led firm, and not while we have products which are functional and we try to make the products as comfortable for the customer, but design is the main driver of the entire collection philosophy.
But how do you arrive at this design-led philosophy? Like, I know about your co-founding team, but if you can tell us, like, how did you make this perfect founding team, all 4 founders?
Yeah, so the good thing about us is that all the 4 of us do not come from fashion background, right? I was in marketing in Walmart. Aditya, who's one of my co-founder, he was in tech, he was working with Tally. And then we have Khushbu, who was in banking. And Sonal, while she is a gold medalist from NIPT, she was not into fashion per se, right? She was working with Titan and stuff like that. So when we started Campus Sutra, we were able to think about this afresh, right? It was whatever we built in Campus Sutra has been using the first principle thing. It has not been कि industry में ऐसा होता है तो let's just do this, or industry में ये process है तो let's just do this. So the way we approach this entire thing is कि if I have to make a shirt, right? What is the process of making a shirt? Can I make it more efficient? Can I make it better? Can I reduce the cost? Can I make the designs better? Can I be in the market faster? Right? So it was all about just using common sense and kind of building that process. And that has helped us even now. Right? So whenever we are thinking of building a collection, it is not about कि मैं SS26 का भी बनाऊंगा. It is about what is working now, what is the trend now, how can I get that fabric fast in my ecosystem, and how can I give it to the customer at the best possible value, right? We don't want to be a brand known for price. That's not our route, right? We're not, and we have seen a lot of brands struggle in that space because as soon as you define your brand in terms of pricing, you are not able to innovate on the product. You're not able to bring the best quality product that your customer deserves, right? So while we want to be a value brand, which is offering value to the customer, but it did not be a cheap product, right? It is about providing the best value for that product to the customer, and that's what I think we have been able to achieve.
But does it also mean having a wide price point where you can sell a t-shirt for, let's say, 500 rupees and a jacket for 5,000? Is that what you mean?
Not 5 rupees.
I said 500.
Yeah. So I think the way we would say this is that you can sell a jacket for, say, even $500.
Right.
But there are jackets which a legacy brand would sell for maybe 5,000, right? Can you get that jacket for 2,000? Or can you get a better looking jacket for 2,000? So, the product has to be benchmarked with the best in the industry.
Best in class.
Right? The best that you can get, but at a value pricing. Here, so we don't want to be defining our brand in terms of $499, $399, $299. That's for some other players to do, right? We want to be a brand जिसको देख के लोगों को लगे कि यार मैं if I have bought a 500 rupee shirt or a 1,000 rupee shirt, the person should feel that it feels like a 2,000 rupee shirt. But that's the position.
And so I'm just interested to understand. So you have 4 people come together to build the business, and none of you were in fashion. How did you arrive at this whole culture and what you needed to disrupt? And because you obviously didn't have any, it's a good thing you didn't have any biases, but you still had to arrive at some fundamental pillars. This business works this way. this is the culture we need to build. Because from what I'm hearing, what you're saying is, you are constantly innovating and evolving, and that's the culture of your company. Because otherwise, I don't think you'll be able to do thousand different designs a month. So you've cracked a lot of things, but how was it to build that core pillars?
So I think as far as the culture is concerned, I'm a very firm believer that, a culture of the company, especially when you are starting out, is built by what the founder does, not by what he says or what he feels to say. So initially when we were building it up, we did anything and everything, right? From sweeping the floor to, packing goods and all of that, right? So we have done everything, right? And people who joined us at that point of time, they knew that, what kind of people they are working with, what is the passion that, we bought on the table. And then that gets percolated. So out of the first 10 employees that joined us 10, 12, 11 years back, 8 of us are still with us. Our culture is so strong, and I always give this example that if 10 people leave our company, and usually they leave because of the high salaries that some of these pandit startup kind of, pay, 5 of them come back. We have had people go to some very, very big brand.
Sure.
And I still remember this guy who came back after 10 odd days, and he said ki, sir, mujhe वापस रख लीजिए. There I feel like there's dead people walking. I can't work a day longer. So we build that culture which thrives on innovation, which thrives on doing new things and all of that. And business ka fundamental same रहता है. So whether you understand fashion, don't understand fashion, as long as you understand the fundamentals of a business and you're able to apply your mind, I think you will work out, what is required. And I think that's the approach that we have taken, which has worked for us.
Very interesting. And I have another question, like the one you just said, that you tweaked your manufacturing process and you made it more efficient. Now, usually the conventional mindset is, if you're building a fashion brand, if you want to sell online, everyone is focused on these KPIs, like what is the repeat rate, what is the average order value, or whatever, what is a CAC, what is the LTV. You never thought about those things. You had different KPIs.
Correct.
So how did that happen? Like, what went into that?
So we realized very early on that if you want to build a business, then you need to do all those KPIs that you're talking about, right? And we have seen this with a lot of businesses. So there is an industry-defined KPI, which is mainly driven by what investors want.
Right.
So
VC KPI.
VC KPIs, right? So यदि कोई भी यदि आज फैशन बिजनेस में इन्वेस्टर के पास जाता है तो ये बताए
Average order value क्या है?
रेट क्या है, एवरेज
Exactly.
all of that, right? Which can take you to a certain level. We realized कि यदि Zara कैसे बना? Zara bana because they innovated on the back end.
Yeah.
Right? Used to be at one point of time was doing very well. They had done a lot of innovations at the back end. So any big company which has been made world over ever
America also better, no?
yes, has been able to do that by innovating at the back end. So we realized कि unless we build that back end, वो front end में कितना भी कुछ कर ले रहा है, the differentiation will be only maybe 10-20% here than that. So that's why our focus was on building the back end, the supply chain. A lot of people, claim to be fast fashion, right? But if you go to their website or if you go to their store, right, and you see how many products have changed in 1 month, you will see that, there's hardly any change because they've not built a backend for it. So while in marketing and in your positioning, you can talk about fast fashion, but because you don't have a backend, you're not delivering on fast fashion. So we realized this very early. Sure. If fast fashion हमें करना है, तो our backend should be able to churn those many designs, get those product to the consumer fast and all of that. Unless until you do that, it remains a marketing image, which is what we see in the industry. A lot of people talk about fast fashion, super fast fashion. We are sustainable, we are bad, right? But very honestly, they don't understand the backend. They don't have the backend. They don't have the supply chain which can deliver on those promises.
For a lot of, doesn't piss you off? Not a lot of people raise capital and talk about marketing and brand and a lot of these Vixie front end stuff. This, like we talk about CAC and retention and all.
And also packaging, website.
You've done the danda the hard way, and this is not a new danda. This has been going on for years and centuries, but you've figured out how to crack this, and then you have all of these Uber-funded companies coming in saying that, oh, we know D2C in fashion.
Not really. Everybody has their own journey, right? So who am I to pass a judgment on that? But I always tell my team that, running a bootstrap large fashion business is like dating the hottest girl in college and getting her to pay for dinner. Every day. 1,000 days a month. 1,000 decides a month. So that's a difficult task. It's a challenge for the team to kind of, it requires you to be the best at what you are day in, day out, right? Business at an overall level is always, the way I see it, it's a fight between the P&L and the balance sheet. right? Ki, your profit and loss account in terms of how fast you want to grow. And then you have the balance sheet, which is, which can support it not.
Yeah.
So what happens with, especially with funded startup, because the balance sheet constraint is taken away,
It's strong.
you end up doing a lot of things which in the long
You're not doing.
not necessary for
Yeah, sure.
right. So it in a way hollows down your business. So why you create a 500 crore brand, the founders are only left with 10% stake.
Sure.
Right. Then the other problems start in terms of whether you are able to kind of whether you have that motivation to run that day to day in day out, whether you have a couple of bad cycles and it's a the investment climate is not very conducive, whether do you survive or not, right? So so while there is a lot of challenges of running a bootstrap company, it makes you it makes you stay very true to what your business is. So which kind of helps you in the medium to long term.
Now, what you just said is one of the most powerful insights I have heard. Balance sheet and P&L.
Yeah.
No one really thinks like that.
Nobody thinks of
Because people, like you said, you need to have a strong balance sheet to support a strong P&L. Like there can't be a mismatch between balance sheet and P&L. What all these founders do is their balance sheet becomes strong because they have 20 billion in the bank account and they don't care about P&L. They keep guzzling money and eventually either you raise more capital or it weakens your balance sheet. A very powerful insight.
Founders don't really know what's there in their balance sheet and then
They don't even know.
KNL really, yeah.
They don't even know what a balance sheet is.
जो पहली बार कर रहा था उसको balance sheet ही नहीं balance the balance sheet and figure it out, right?
एक और चीज क्या होता है ना, so when you are running a startup, because there's so many things happening around you, right? From time to time you make mistake, right? So you have a balance sheet which is like a monitor, which is like your teacher or your parent or whatever who keeps coming and knocking you out. Keep us, you're doing this wrong, you need to correct it. When you don't have that teacher, when you don't have the balance sheet saying that you're doing this wrong, many times that cue that is required to correct yourself as a business does not happen. So जब भी हमारे balance sheet में कुछ issue होता है, we know that there are certain things that we need to change, and we have seen that really helps us course correct, helps us do things which are good for the business and stuff like that.
So one follow-on question on this, because traditionally this is how businesses were built. Like balance sheet supported P&L. If your balance sheet could have a 10 crore P&L, you only do 10 crore sales, right? But that usually hinders growth because that, like if you're only dependent upon your balance sheet, it's difficult to grow 2x every year. How did you solve that problem?
So what I've realized is that say 20 years back or even 10 years back, capital was a constraint in India. Now that is no longer a constraint. If you are running a healthy balance sheet and P&L, there are a lot of avenues to raise. Right? So we have raised debt from the bank. We have a credit rated balance sheet. Right? So we have DNB and a lot of these guys that we have got then to run those numbers on our balance sheet, and we have it foolproof, right? So we are able to get debt from the bank. We're able to get other means of whatever fund. So fund is no longer a constraint. So if you're running a strong business, while a lot of people think that fund, it might be a constraint in some businesses like a tech business or maybe a business like Flipkart, where you are creating a platform and it requires you to invest a lot of money for it.
Right.
But otherwise, capital is no longer a constraint. Whether you're growing at 50%, 100%, if you're doing it well, then you will get the money. It's not that difficult in current day and time, that your growth will be stalled because of capital.
And those are very tough business, right? Fashion, because it's like, I remember a Scorpion song called Winds of Change. The fashion sense changes very quickly, right? So adaptability is one of the key things, because there are so many companies in the last 10 years have come in fashion, not just during the beauty wave, but before as well. But a lot of them have not been able to survive. Sure, of course, everybody knows about Myntra and Flipkart acquiring Myntra, and again, Myntra was a marketplace. How have you managed to kind of innovate at space at the supply chain side, but at the same time be nimble enough to sniff out the market and get there before anybody else does?
So you reduce the cost of mistake, right? Fashion is a business where you will make mistake, right? You will not get it right 100% of the time, which is required, every year, right? So you reduce the cost of mistake. So the backend that we have designed, the tech that we have designed, it ensures that if we make a mistake in anything, in terms of collection, in terms of product and all of that, the cost of that to the business is low, right? So as I said earlier, right, I'm not taking I'm not taking a forecast 18 months down the line. I'm not creating products ki 18 mahine ke baad I'm creating products depending on what my sell-throughs are month on month. I'm to the trend. So even if I get couple of trends wrong, the impact of that on the business is going to be very, very low compared to some other player where they have taken big bets and they're left with dead inventory. Our dead inventory is less than 2%. Since the day we have started the business, and we would have done, I think, maybe 1,500 crore or crore of business, right? We have not had to dispose of even couple of crores of inventory. So this we will in very, very small percentage. That's because they have been able to build the system which is self-correcting. So whenever something goes wrong, there are signals that my system and mate कि ये सही नहीं चल रहा, you need to correct it, and then obviously we take action on that.
So you are building the business like how traditionally Silicon Valley companies used to build, nimble and frugal, without wasting capital, and very nimble, very adaptable.
Correct.
And one more question, because you're talking about this topic. For you, since you have built such a powerful fashion brand, what are the key metrics you guys track? What are your internal metrics? Because you don't have investor metric. You don't care about investors.
Right. So obviously, it keeps evolving over a period of time, right? So the way our business is structured, or the way we kind of define our metrics, is from time to time, we define areas that we want to excel in. Like, so initially when I was talking about, the back end and all of that, so we did a lot of that work in the initial years of our time, right? After that, we went offline. So the metrics that we were tracking, or the kind of focus that we as management team were kind of putting in, was in terms of getting that offline piece right. Then we went international. So obviously the metrics kind of changed about that in terms of, which markets you attack, how successful you're in that market, whether you're losing money, how much you're growing, and things like that, right? Currently, for example, we are in the phase where we are working a lot in terms of creating social media content, in terms of creating our app, our website for the consumer, right? So currently you'll see that most of our top management is really focused on that. And then there are metrics for those that we are following. So it keeps changing. You can't have obviously there are certain metrics like profitability, growth.
So there are certain metrics are tied together to your North Star metrics, but otherwise you are able to kind of size it down to different functional aspects, strategic aspects.
Yeah, because for most funded startups, fashion D2C startups, their metric is revenue growth, customer acquisition, number of customers. Yours are more traditional, like profitability. You don't want to grow at 5x every day if that requires burning money.
You also need to understand the industry, right? If you look at fashion as a business, world over, I don't think there is any company which has grown at 5x for any customer name, right? So you can burn 100 crores and do a 200 crore revenue. Yeah. Second year, when you have to get a growth on that without burning money, it's almost impossible. So you also need to know the nature of your business. If you are in a tech business where 10x growth is possible, that's when you should be targeting 10x. In a fashion business where, a certain certain percentage is possible, you can't be looking at a growth rate which is not commensurate with the industry. I think that's been one of the reasons that a lot of funded startups have shut down in India. Because you get money at a certain valuation, and that there is a certain percentage growth that you're committed to the investor.
Right.
That over a period of time may be possible, may not be possible. If you're true to yourself, if you understand the business, you know what is possible, and if you're committed that to the investor, then it works. Right? But if you have committed numbers which are not necessarily, in sync with what is possible in the industry, that's when the problems start.
Here's one very important question that I always had in mind for you. Why did you decide not to raise capital? Because your background, MBA, worked with Walmart, you are that typical tech founder. The guy who has a great business idea, keeps on raising, keeps on building. Why did you strike a different path?
So when we started, we didn't start with the mindset कि हमें bootstrap ही करना है and we don't want to raise fund and all of that. So I still remember this meeting that we had with one of the top VC firm. I was sitting across the table with their main managing partner, and the conversation went something like this. You guys have built a really good business. The number
Then was this?
was in about 2015, I suppose, 2015.
So you already had some revenue by then?
Yeah, good revenue. So in the first year, we had done about 11 months, we had done about 25 odd crores, right? And 25 crores for that time was a lot. Is like, So he was very impressed with the numbers, but he was like, dude, you guys are in bad neighborhood. Because that's the time when not a lot of fashion businesses had gone out of, our business. So you had a history of a lot of fashion businesses raising a lot of money and then shutting down. There was this entire question mark on the fashion business overall, right? E-commerce fashion business. So it made us think that whether this is the right way to approach this. Why is it that so many businesses have raised such good amount of capital have good founders, but they've not been able to succeed. So maybe then this is not the right way of approaching this, right? And that's where the entire thought process came in, where we decided how do we differentiate, how do we make it without money, how do we build the backend, and all the things that I was talking about. So it made us challenge the entire system that kind of existed in the market and made us take a different route.
And also, I think not raising capital made you more robust, because then you were not dependent upon external dollars to survive.
Correct. So this has been something which is very, very dear to us as a team, right? That we don't want to be in a situation where if money is not coming in next year, we shut down, right? For us, a bad case scenario is that if I'm growing at 50%, if I have a bad year, I grow at 25%, right? So that's the situation that we are comfortable with. But we don't ever want to be in a situation where if I'm not getting money next year, or if I'm not getting the money the year after next, my business shuts down. Right? So it has made us build a business which is fundamentally strong, which is not dependent on funding. So if say tomorrow, even if I raise money, the only difference it will make is if I'm growing at 50, maybe I'll grow at 70%, or maybe I'll grow at 100%. But it will not make any major difference apart from that.
But you never thought that, hey, I am growing at 50, let's say your average growth has been 50%. You never thought that with external capital, maybe I can make it 80%?
So the thought process is every industry has a trend line, right? Unlike a tech business or a platform business where there's a possibility of growing 2x, 3x year on year, a fashion business can obviously, when you have a small base, you can grow 5-10x. But once you have reached a certain limit, I can't think of any brand anywhere in the world which has grown at even 2x for say 2, 3 or 5 years. Right? So you need to appreciate the industry that you are in. Many times in that pursuit of growing very fast, you might end up taking decisions which hurt you in the long run, right? कि आपने inventory इतना बना दिया because आपको 2x grow करना है, and then the inventory is not selling. Or you have opened so many stores and you have a lot of non-performing stores. Or you spend a lot of money in marketing without actually realizing the gain out of that. So you end up doing a lot of things which kind of make the business non-viable. Here, for every dollar, every rupee that I'm spending, right, there's a question mark in terms of what am I getting back? Whether it is in terms of sales, in terms of profitability, in terms of brand building or whatever, right? So every rupee that is being spent after a lot of thought. So the foundation is very, very strong, and that's what's very, very dear to us.
So Dhiraj, which year did you guys decide to go international, and what is the thought process behind going international?
So we went international 4 years back. One of my co-founder Aditya, he was in Dubai, where Amazon had called him for to talk to the team there and things like that, right? To talk to the entire ecosystem. And the feeling that we got is that in some of these markets are 5 years behind India, right? So Dubai maybe in 2019-20 was where India was in 2014, as in there was no ecosystem, e-commerce was taking shape, but there was no brand ecosystem and things like that. So we thought of it as an opportunity that whatever we have done in India, there's an opportunity of replicating that in the Dubai market or a Saudi market, and we did that, and we got very, very good results. So what happens in India whenever somebody is talking about going international, it is about going and attacking the NRI, right? So you have a lot of these ethnic brands who say that I'm international, but it's not like they're going and selling it to the locals. Yeah, they are selling to the Indian who is staying there. So we realized very early on that if you have the right proposition, the average Joe in these markets will buy your product. We tasted success in Middle East. Then we went to US, Canada, where we opened offices there, and we tried to replicate whatever we are doing here, and we got success there. Then we went to Europe, where we are there in almost the whole of Europe, and again we did the same thing. While every market has different set of learnings, the basic proposition remains the same. That if you are able to understand what that market needs, and you're able to create that product and give it at the right value, there's a market to be made, and that has really worked for us.
Interesting. And your TG remains, your target group remains exactly the same across all these markets, but then there are obviously the cultural nuances or other things.
And different price points.
So we are a brand for 18 to 35 year age group. Sure. We are a brand which is mass premium. We are a brand who's hitting the middle segment. We are a brand in Indian context, for example, somebody who's staying in a nuclear family, who's looking for convenience, who's looking for latest design, right? So there are certain traits that has been kind of ingrained in our company's DNA. So wherever we go, whatever we do, whether it is with category expansion or it is with the brand expansion or it is with geographical expansion, we keep this sacrosanct. And then we try and adapt this to that market or to that segment or to that category.
Got it. So when, just help me understand this. When going international, what does this imply? You have already big supply chain. So you've got a bunch of designs which you will adapt it for a particular market. When you're, say, going to Dubai or when you go to Saudi, do you have a channel partner? Do you have on-ground logistics? How do you stackify that? You have obviously the online part. How do you run the offline operations there?
So if you say that, there are 100 things required to run Campus Sutra in India.
Sure.
Right from designing to, production to supply chain, sourcing, running a website, running front end and all of that.
Sure.
So 90% of that can be standardized. And 90% of that is what we are already doing. Right. So whenever we're talking about entering a new market, the 10% that is required to adapt to that market, right? Whether it is about starting a company there, getting those registrations, working with those retailers, or doing your own website which fits the taste and of that audience, right? The 10% is what we change, right? Rest 90%, because India continues to be cost competitive and we're able to get the talent which understands the international environment. The 90% continues to be done from India. The 10% which is required to be done from that market is done from that market.
Understood. Yeah, the reason I asked you that question is very often we find, especially in the venture world, companies raise money at a pre-series A, series A. They don't have defined playbooks of how to attack a particular international market, and they tend to go there and try different things and then try to not hit PMF or run through a lot of cash. Correct. That actually happens a lot. So
before we entered the international market, we already had 6-7 years of building in India. We had a product proposition which was very strong, which was being which had a very good footprint in the Indian market. And India is the size of a continent, right? So if you have a successful brand which is running in India across geographies, you have got few things right. Then it is about adapting that to the international market. What happens with a lot of other companies, I'll short, there are different companies do it different way. If they start off very early, while the product is not ready in India, they go to the US market or they go to the European market, and then they're confused whether USDA banana hai ki gadget banana hai. So after a couple of years, they end up ki
no, because see, the other one is because I think Pushkar knows this from my. I've invested in a 3D modeling business, a virtual fashion company. The sizes are so different across different markets, right? I mean, that's one of the challenges when you export a fashion business or import a fashion business, because the Indian figure is different from a European figure, is vastly different from a South Asian figure to the US. So that's the
sensibility is different.
Sensibility is different, but yeah, the figure, the contours, cloth, and the sensibility is different. So those are things that you just have to handle. But you're telling me that 90% of your block is kind of fixed, and you're delivering it from India, which is kind of super optimized, and
not necessarily. We would have some block, we have models there, we have warehouses there.
Sure.
But that's the only thing we have there.
Got it.
We don't have any production unit there. We don't have any designers there. We don't have a big team sitting out of there, right? So whatever can be done from India is being done from India. Only what cannot be done from India is being done from those countries.
Wow.
Impressive.
So 90% of the playbook is same all over the world. And I find it so interesting that you ventured into Europe, the home of fashion.
Fashion capital, right?
I'm not sure whether it will remain the home of fashion for a long time, right? Because with whatever is happening with the supply chain, and because Europe has got heavily, deindustrialized, right?
Right.
And fashion is becoming more about how strong your back end is. So you have a lot of these fashion brands and a lot of these fashion houses in Europe really struggling. Really struggling. So just by the same thing that we were talking about earlier, right? Just by creating the front-end metrics, it can sustain you to a certain degree. They're acting as a continent, it is facing the same problem, that they have the front-end metrics, they know how to create great designs, they have, they know how to speak that language, create the price. But everything that is required at back end is happening far away from Europe. So that, I think, over a period of time will catch it.
Especially if they have trade wars.
Correct.
It's very difficult for them to get it manufactured in Asia.
Yeah. So
like they have these amazing legacy brands.
maybe I'm being a little cocky here, but you expect like what Tata did there, go and buy Jaguar, Land Rover, do you expect a lot of Chinese brands and Indian brands to go and acquire these?
So, okay, let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
When is Campus Sutra going to buy our money?
Very honestly, somebody like an Asos, the market cap of Asos is only 250 billion. Very honestly,
Wow,
right?
that's it.
As of now, with whatever is happening in that continent and what is happening with that company. And Asos is such a great brand.
Cult brand.
Right. Very honestly, if I had money, I would go and acquire Asos today. Right. So there are these opportunities where you have a lot of great brands, great platforms that have been built,
For overpriced.
but they're struggling. So if anybody puts a serious thought in terms of acquiring some of these assets and kind of, I think it's a great opportunity.
But then why aren't these big Indian conglomerates going and acquiring Europe, like Tata's and Ambani?
But I think it's a thing about mindset, right? In India, because the market is growing very fast, right?
Right.
Many times we tend to kind of be inward looking, and we are busy kind of we're busy kind of maximizing the opportunity in India. We don't look outside. But I think a time will come where, because we don't have a lot of the stigma or issues that a Chinese brand have. So while a lot of companies in China are very good at manufacturing, right? They have 2-3 very big constraints. One, they don't understand the language. Right? So if anyone in China is running a big factory, उसको नहीं समझ में आता है उसका, right? Second, the culture is very, very different because we are English speaking, and most of us, right, at least in the metro, we have grown up looking at those series and movies and all of that.
Right.
We are able to understand the nuances of a European market or American market much better than a Chinese. Right? What India is lacking is only production. So if we get the manufacturing story right, if we are able to create that manufacturing base, I think you will see a lot of brands coming from India. That's the next wave of growth that I think you'll see in Indian brand. People are not doing it now, but 10 years down the line, I won't be surprised if you have 25 good brands that are created from India serving the world.
Awesome. Well, this was extremely insightful, and we are much appreciative of you spending time with us. And I think a lot of our followers would have gotten a lot of deep insights from you. We would love to thank our location partners, BHIVE, who have wonderful locations all across Bangalore and now in Bombay as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.